My research focuses on microplastic pollution in the deep sea, specifically looking at how the microplastics move from the surface water down into the deep sea and how that might interact with the benthic invertebrates that live there, and assess the amount of plastic in the invertebrates, the water and the sediment. The area that I work at is about 2,000 metres deep in the Rockall Trough in the Northeast Atlantic Ocean. The great depth means it's very hard to sample, so we deploy sleds which go down to the seabed and scoop up the top bit of sediment, which we bring up and find the animals that are inside. So we know that there's a large amount of plastic in the surface waters, but actually there's a lot less in the surface than we expect to find, which indicates that the final location of this plastic may be the deep sea. Despite the fact that polymers are both more and less dense than seawater, we find those polymers, such as polyethylene that you use in plastic bags, still down on the seabed. In total, we found about 10 different types of plastic down in this area. They have a range of different applications, from packaging to use in textiles, consumer goods, and marine netting and things like that. So there's a really wide diversity of plastics down in this deep sea area. We looked at 3 different benthic invertebrates and found high levels of plastic in each of those species, easily comparable with the abundance ingested by coastal and surface water species. It did vary between the individuals that I looked at, and intraspecifically, so the different feeding modes were investigated to see whether this influenced the ingestion, but was not found to be the case. So the plastic was ubiquitous regardless of the size of the individual or the different feeding mode. The greatest abundance of microplastics was found in the predatory sea star Hymenasta pellucidus, but high levels also found in the 2 other species that I investigated, the brittle star Ophimusium lamani and the gastropod Colus jeffreysianus. While it's not easy to assess the direct impacts of these plastics on the deep sea species, studies in the lab of coastal species have found a whole suite of negative impacts associated with the plastics. They do have the ability to pass up the food chain, so those lower organisms that ingest the plastic, that plastic can travel up the food chain and potentially could be inside the fish that we're eating. The next stage is to complement this with some sediment. So we've addressed how much plastic there is in the water, in the invertebrates. So to complete the ecosystem approach, we need to look at the sediment and see if the abundance is different in each of these reservoirs, coupled with how that plastic might move from the surface water down into the deep sea using hydrodynamic models.